Is it a rabbi that for the sin of gravitating towards congregants I like when I'm the rabbi of this entire congregation? Wow. Wow. And I want to, what I'm going to talk about today is regret. And I think what was coming out in that personalized al-Kheit list was the experience of regret that these rabbis were struggling with professionally. So if it's not too much to ask of you, I'm going to give you a timed minute to and if that's not enough, we'll do a little bit more. But if you hate this exercise, just know it's only a minute long. Is to write your own al-Khaits, two for yourself and your, and as you are as a professional, and one is something where you feel your congregation has fallen short. So let me get my handy dandy timer so that I will be accurate to the exact minute. And I assume that all of you have a pen or a pencil in front of you. Yes, I usually can count on that with rabbis. So I'm going to start that minute right now, and I'll participate in the exercise as well.
Hello.
Sid, we're here. We're doing a writing exercise.
We're writing down for the sin of. So if you, an al-Kheit list about the rabbinate, two individual and one for the congregation.
Got it. I was trying to sign on via computer and I was not getting in. I'm still not through my computer. I don't know if that's my end or something else.
All right, 30 seconds left. Okay. Do you need extra time? No. Okay. So does anyone want to share? You don't have to, but you're welcome to if you want to. Maybe one little share. Yeah, please.
I'll share. I said, for the sin of procrastinating difficult phone calls.
For the sin of procrastinating different phone calls. I love that. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for creating this and bringing us together. It's really been exceptional. All right, procrastinating phone calls. Yes.
For the sin of neglecting my colleagues during the time of crisis.
Neglecting my colleagues for the time of crisis. I recall someone here, a head of school, who was struggling. There were kids who, a huge number of kids who were expelled for a drug-related offense. And 2 weeks passed by and he sent an email to a number of us. He said, "You're my colleagues. This has been the hardest time in my professional life and I haven't heard from one of you." And that chastisement really, really affected me. Anyone else? Yeah, please, Michelle.
For the sin of not having enough energy for both work and family.
Mine was very similar, Michelle. For the sin of not managing my burnout. Someone else?
For the sin of preaching a good sermon and then not following it myself.
Ouch. Lots of head nodding there. Anyone else? So I want to talk about this. Oh yeah, Mark,
You caught me.
was that a hand or that was just a
No,
gentle?
that wasn't the hand. For the sin of being too quick to dismiss idiotic ideas that come up around Zoom. I tend to dismiss these crazy ideas.
Yeah,
I'm very patient with them.
I'm not sure if you label them idiotic, if you will actually ever accept them, but
You get the point.
I get the point, Mark. I get the point. Anyone have any about the congregation? Yeah, please, Margaret.
For the sin of, how did I say this? For the sin of thinking we don't have enough.
Mm, beautiful. Thumbs up there. Yeah, Suzanne.
For the sin of not being open to new ideas.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to Mark there, but a little bit broader. Anyone want to reflect on the process of doing this? I know that you were irritated with me. It's okay. I can deal with it.
I was not irritated.
Oh, thank you for not being irritated.
Actually, I think it's a great board exercise. We are
Yeah.
at a transition point because we install, which is a word I detest, but we install a new board in June. And so this could be a really interesting way to do some board development stuff.
Yeah, I've heard some amazing sort of confessions. I guess confessions doesn't need the self, but confessions where people said for the sin of not showing up, for the sin of not donating more, for the sin of interrupting, for the sin of not being prepared. I mean, it's actually, and also as a synagogue, where people as a whole have to reflect on how are we doing and what part do I uphold in saying, we say we're for the sin of saying that we're a warm and welcoming congregation and then not being warm and welcoming. So there's been a lot of reckoning moments. And one of the things that you can do is allow people to process this one-on-one before having a group session about it. I find that enables everybody to sort of speak and share their truth, and then Mark said the synagogue. There's actually an outstanding book called Synagogue, written by David Bashefkin, and that, by the way, if you're looking, I said I would mention lots of books that have been helpful for me. David Bashefskin's book about, which is called Synagogue, S-I-N, Synagogue, is really an outstanding collection of lots of observations about the process of repentance and the impact of sin and the definition of sin. So, and it's also short, which is also nice. Margaret?
I would say one other thing in the name of Sid Schwartz. I think very often we do a very good job of beating ourselves up, right? We all know how to do this. And so he did an exercise once, which I have used successfully, of doing a positive Heshbon HaNefesh. So instead of the alphabetical list of
Oh, I
sins,
love that.
the alphabetical list of things that you're proud of or that you think you do well, or the adjectives to describe yourself. And that might be part A before you get to the sins.
Right. Or, as I'm going to talk about in a second, this is an index card. It is your best friend for exercises. And I'll tell you why. One of the things I do is I'll have people write something. I'll put the index card in front of everybody when I can teach in person. And the advantage of the index card is, that this is not going to be one of those long and tiresome exercises. That's also why I only give people a minute. So if they really don't like it, they sort of know psychically they're not going to be in it for a long time. But the other thing is that the index card has a side B, and the side B, I'll end this exercise with asking them to write tikkunim, right? It was practical, actionable items that they want to take on themselves, so that it's not just a confession of wrongdoing. It's really an expression of right doing. It's sort of, how am I going to write this? And that's also been very, very powerful. So I say that because one of the things I'm thinking a lot about as we transition out of COVID, and I think transitioning is really, really hard because we developed routines and structures during COVID, and we're not really going back 100%. And so how do we lead in this liminal time period? And I mean, we could talk about it for a long time. I've been thinking a lot about the problems and challenges. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that regrets are coming out, right? The regrets around how people, who they've shown up for, who they haven't shown up for, how, how they've managed their own personal lives and their work lives, people they haven't contacted for a really long time. So I've been thinking a lot about regret, and I've been thinking about regret for many, many years and writing about it. And because it's a puzzling sort of emotion. I don't even know if we'd call it an emotion necessarily. And I want to recommend an amazing TED Talk if you have not watched it. It's called Don't Regret by Catherine Schultz. I want to say that it's 16 minutes and 49 seconds, but I could be wrong on that. And I think it's something, I think it's one of those TED Talks that millions of people have viewed. And she wrote this book, Being Wronged, but she sort of deepens her look at this one. She does it through the lens of getting a tattoo. And actually, I was so intrigued by this, the regret that one has over a tattoo that allows her to then go off and talk about the nature of regret. She starts with a tattoo, a picture of Johnny Depp and a tattoo that he had when he was engaged to Winona Ryder. Now I had to look up these characters. I'm not a big TV person, but and anyway, he wrote something like Winona Forever, and then, as in all Hollywood romances, this soured, and then he had some of it removed, so it says Wino Forever. I don't know if that's any better, but if you Google, which I did, regret and tattoo, you will get 11.5 million hits. And the FDA estimates that of all Americans who have tattoos, 17% regret them. And she herself got a tattoo that she regretted. So it's like a sort of soft on-ramp to talk about regrets. And I'm just going to define regret as an emotion we experience when we think that our present situation could be better or happier if we had done something different in the past. And that's why I think regret is important, because it's not only about the past, it's that the past infringes or impinges upon the present in saying, had I not done this then, I would feel differently now. And Schultz says that that we need to think about agency, that regret requires imagination, imagining that we can go back and make a different choice. And I think that's really interesting. She talks about the top 6 regrets people have: education, career, romance, parenting, decisions about our sense of self, and how we spend free or leisure time. One of the things I found really extraordinary about this is she says that finance and spirituality and community rank lower in the top regrets. And then she sort of talks about the consistent components of regret in psychological literature. So one of them is denial. I didn't get this tattoo. This didn't happen to me. I didn't do this. Then bewilderment. I don't understand how this happened. Like, how did I let this happen? So denial, bewilderment, intense desire to punish ourselves. So angry at myself. How could I have let this happen? I'm going to deny myself something as a result of this happening. And then she talks about the perseverative nature, where you focus obsessively on going over and over and over and over this again. I know you have much more experience than I do with this, but I have a little bit of experience of working with people who are dying. And I wrote a book called Happier Endings about death, and could we, quote unquote, die better if we sort of put certain aspects of our lives in order. And one of the things that I noticed is, in interviewing many people who have lost a spouse, is the blame, the obsessive. I should have done this, especially if there is a suicide involved, or something where the person feels, had I only said this, it would have made a difference. And then there's the existential wake-up call. So regret, in terms of her components, involve denial, bewilderment, intense desire to punish the self, the perseverative nature of going over it again obsessively, and then existential wake up call, which I think is, is very striking as a way of processing what goes into a regret. Anyone want to? Yeah, Rivka.
Yeah, it's interesting because you don't have to go any further than Torah, because Aviva Zornberg describes this in her book, and she talks about bewilderment as one of her first things in her book after the Jews left Egypt, and all of a sudden, what do we do? Let's go back. It was so much better there. And so she goes into an extensive, almost the same format that you described here when describing the Jews, as if they woke up after getting married I heard her talk about this in Las Vegas and go, what did I do? And when they left Egypt. And so you don't have to go any further than Torah here.
Yeah. No, great. I think actually applying this rubric to real cases, and I actually think giving people a chance to think about their regrets. So here's where I used my handy dandy index cards. And you can buy 100 for 99 cents. I did a class many years ago in the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I asked people, yes, Mark, even God has regrets. Absolutely. And such a beautiful thing to share from Genesis 6. So I asked people to write a large regret and a small regret and not put their names on their index cards, and then put them into my big gift bag of regrets. And I read them out to people, and maybe there were 100 people in the audience. And, and it was interesting that I'm going to just share a few of these with you. I've had these for some years. The small regret, not sticking with healthy exercise or diet plans, wasting time, wishing I didn't give someone a dirty look. This I thought was quite funny. Someone wrote, not buying a piece of exercise equipment when it was on sale, thinking it's always on sale. But anyway, not making myself known to someone who always forgets who I am, not putting myself out there more the first week of school. And then there were large regrets, cutting people off who were close to me because we both changed, too much anger. This one was fascinating. The too much anger, that was the large regret, and the small regret was giving up on too many dreams, which I would have thought was a large regret. I really, really, really regret disliking my father. I mean, this was a fascinating regret, and then I was happy that I divided it into small and large, because it enabled people to think about some of the smaller regrets as something they could easily repair. Not always the larger regrets, especially if those happened after the death of someone. But what became very, very obvious right away is that the large regrets almost always involved other people, right? The small regrets were often things that one had denied the self or could have worked on. David Brooks did these interviews many years ago of people who were over 70. He asked them to write these short essays to him about their lives, and then he analyzed them. And one of his conclusions is that people generally regretted things they did not do rather than things that they did do. Maybe this is obvious to all of you who are rabbis, but I'm interested in your thoughts about this large and small regret, or anything that we've just said. Any thoughts?
We have a sort of non-traditional slichot service that has involved writing a sin and throwing it, like with washable markers on paper and throwing it in water. I could be recouching that as regret. And that could be interesting. Wow.
That's amazing. Actually, I want to, you remind me that many years ago, I was in California, where also the Board of Rabbis has a large retreat, in-person retreat. and I was teaching there, and it was I want to say it was in August. It was maybe in July or August, and Sharon Brous ran after me as I was waiting for my a taxi to the airport, and she said, "I want to share with you something I do in my shul. So I'm just going to share this. You may know about this, but if you don't know about this, this was very intriguing to me." And she went on to send me some copies. She said it was very hard for her in her rabbinic practice that people just showed up. They just showed up on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They hadn't done any preparation, and they sort of thought that the synagogue experience would do all the work for them, and it just wasn't doing the work for them. So she decided one year that on Rosh Chodesh Elul, she would put out a call to her congregation to reflect on something and send in anonymous pieces about in response to a question. And in response to a question, and what happened was she, hold on a second, I just need to text my daughter to bring up my charger because my computer is gonna run out of, sorry about that. Sorry about this. It just said your computer is low on battery. So yes, so I was talking to her about this, and she said she wrote this question and people responded. And what she did is she based her sermon on Yom Kippur on the responses she got anonymously, and not only on the responses she got anonymously, but she would also put all of them together in a book that would be handed out on Rosh Hashanah. And this was so popular that I don't know how many people were actually looking at the Siddur. They were looking at people's responses, and she would ask them, what crossroads are you at? Who needs your forgiveness right now? And a variety of questions designed to get people to think very carefully about themselves and their wrongdoing. So what happened? One year, she came up, honey, thank you so much. Can you just plug it in? One year, I have a good daughter. I have two good daughters, actually, I should say, and two good sons. Thank you. So she asked one year, after doing this for many, many years, she asked a question and it just didn't resonate, and people didn't give really deep or vulnerable or open responses. So she said, I've got to salvage this. And because she's a rabbi in LA, she takes people to the beach for Tashlach between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and she handed out index cards and multicolored markers. And she asked one question. And the question was this: what are you waiting for? That was it. What are you waiting for? And people wrote their answers. It took a few minutes. They did Tashlach, and she collected them. And she said she read them and cried. She spent the night reading them and crying. I guess there were hundreds of responses. And she asked an artist in residence to put them together as a large wall, sort of a wall of regrets. And she said that was the most transformational question she had ever asked in those years, was, what are you waiting for? I'm waiting to be loved. I'm waiting to find love. I'm waiting to be healed. I'm waiting for a job. And I'm waiting to get out of this bad marriage. That was the question that precipitated real change. And that's always of interest to me. What's the question that gets people to really change? It's not, and regret is an important reckoning, but then you're saying to yourself, when you say, what am I waiting for? Why am I waiting? Why am I not utilizing my human agency to make things happen? So I wanted to look at, quickly, I wanted to look at a handout with you that I prepared on regret. No, this is not it. Okay, I see what's going to happen. Let me just get out of a few documents. Okay, get out of this document. And we're going to share now. Okay, this is a painting. We looked at a painting last week. This is by David Mirzoyan called Regret. Anything you see in this painting? it's an abstract painting. And feel free to share
Mhm.
any.
It
Suzanne?
looks like a bent back.
Mhm.
Somebody, that's how I see that sort of body language of regret.
Yeah, and the longer you look at this, the more the body begins to emerge from the black and the blue. So first of all, I think the color choices are really interesting. The bottom is all black. The top is, there's a lot of blue. If you ask people, and that's a great name for a sermon, The Color of Regret. If you ask people to think about what color it would it be black? Would it be blue? And then I think the artist has painted some beautiful, lighter sort of lavenders and lighter blues, and whites there, to sort of imagine that if this person can turn around, right, his head is in his hands. And if you look, his head is being held up by his hands are in two positions, really like holding the head, and in this fetal position, we're bent, so bent out of shape because of the way that regret has shaped him. And so what I think the painting is very evocative of what happens being bent over. Last time we talked about the term masa, of the weight and carrying something. And here I think there's a good illustration of what happens when you carry regret for a long time. You become this sort of hunchback of being unsettled, of despair. And what I wanted to do is look at two schools of regret. And I started this work actually because I was reading about all kinds of public apologies, celebrities and, I don't know, athletes and politicians, where they seem to have no regrets. And so I looked up all these quotes on people having no regrets. So, and some of them are very instructive because we can see the weight that bogs people down. Never look back unless you're planning to go that way. Thoreau, Jonathan Safran Foer, the mistakes I've made are dead to me, but I can't take back the things I never did. Jodi Picoult, my dad used to say that living with regrets was like driving a car that only moved in reverse. And I think that's a really powerful image. And I'd rather regret the things I've done than regret the things I haven't done. And then there was school number two, which is you can't help having regrets. And Arthur Miller says maybe all you can do is hope to end up with the right regrets. Or from Dr. Zhivago, I don't think I could love you so much if you had nothing to complain of and nothing to regret. I don't like people who've never fallen or stumbled. Their virtue is lifeless and of little value. Life hasn't revealed its beauty to them. And, this quote made me think when someone says, oh yeah, I have no regrets, in my head, I think, and you must not be a very interesting person. And then this, I don't even know where I found this, but eventually something you love is going to be taken away, and then you'll fall to the floor crying. And then however much later it's finally happening to you, you're falling to the floor crying, thinking, I am falling to the floor crying. So you're having an in-body and out-of-body sort of meta conversation, but there's an element of the ridiculous to it. You knew it would happen. And even worse, while you're on the floor crying, you look at the place where the wall meets the floor and you realize you didn't paint it very well. So, this is about, how you manage the regrets that you have, because you're gonna have them. And so I wanted to match these two sort of have no regrets and you can't help but have regrets. These two schools of thought, could I find some rabbinic literature that would deal with them? And the first I found was in Brachot. Rav Kahana said, I consider impudent one who specifies his transgressions. And it was, don't name your sins, right? It's almost a prideful behavior to name your wrongdoing. As it stated, happy is he whose iniquity is forgiven, whose transgression is covered over, right? Meaning one who conceals his transgressions indicates that he's ashamed of them, and due to shame, he will be forgiven. So does perseverating on one's regrets as opposed to covering them over and moving on, and like what enables change? Is it being so deeply meshed in regret that you don't know how to overcome and move on, and therefore it'd be better to cover those regrets? Or is it better to name them? So I have the Rambam here, The Rambam says, Kol hamitzvot shebetorah ben aseh ben lo taseh im avar adam al achat mehem bim b'zadon bim b'shgaga k'sheyaseh tshuva v'yashuv mecheto chayav litvadot lifnei ha'el baruch hu. Right. So this is the opening of Maimonides' laws of repentance, where he says, man or woman, anyone who does a sin, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is obligated to confess them. And then he goes into the details. And he, you name the sin, and then you say, I am ashamed. I regret and I'm ashamed of my actions. And I won't do this again. So you've got this idea of, yes, you have to name your sins. You have to name them, and you actually have to say out loud, I regret them and I'm embarrassed by them, because maybe in not naming them specifically, you also, and not expressing regret, hopefully in a meaningful way and not in a sort of quick chest beating way, that by naming them and expressing regret over them explicitly, you can actually then move forward. So I just wanted to, in concluding, looking at these thoughts, Kierkegaard's response, I see it all perfectly. There are two possible situations. One can either do this or that. My honest opinion, my friendly advice is do it or do not do it. You will regret both. It was in some way, it is not possible not to have regrets, no matter any choice that we make will result in some form of regret. Maybe Arthur Miller at least have worthwhile regrets, brings to mind. So I want to stop the share here. And I wanted to just ask you how you might construct a sermon on regret. Where would you go with this if you wanted to talk about regret?
I think it's important if you're going to talk about this, because it could leave people very depressed and in a down. So you have to give them a way out. So you also have to talk about forgiveness of the self.
Right.
I don't see how you can talk about regret without talking about the needing to forgive oneself and in that way being free of the past that we carry on. So that's how I would construct a sermon.
Right. So, and would you do that first, Mark? Or you talk about regret first and then talk about self-forgiveness?
Probably, but I haven't thought it out. So don't hold me into it. But
no.
You'd have to have both of them in there, and you'd have to end with the self-forgiveness. You can't end on the regret.
Right. And actually, you can use that piece of Talmud in Brachot about the covering over of one's sin as really a religious mandate to find ways to put a cover on the wrongdoing so that you may live, so that you may form relationships, so that you can continue. I actually also want to talk about one thing and get your responses to it. I have a new category of tshuva, and that is to forgive organizations. We tend to think of forgiving ourselves, forgiving God, forgiving other people. But I've noticed that over time, in many of the nonprofits I've worked with, people get upset about something an organization does to them, and they can't get over it. They just never move on. And they, your synagogue did something wrong. The rabbi didn't show up when your father was ill. You didn't know. In other words, no one told you, but you as the rabbi now are bearing the weight of all of this. And it could be that incident, or could be something in the family's past, right? You didn't do this for my mom. And that was, the previous rabbi didn't do this. And you're sort of inviting people to have a new relationship with organizations that are important to them. And how do you forgive organizations? And I think, institutional regrets are interesting, right? As where not only where someone is forgiving an organization like a shul, but where we're also as a shul sort of having an open conversation about the institution's regrets. Yeah, Paul? I just saw Judah this past Shabbat.
Yeah, we're actually in DC now for the wedding this past. Anyway, so I find congregants for the most part very unforgiving of even the smallest sins of a synagogue. And I like what you're saying about organizations. As someone who's been very involved, my dad was a federation director. You know, I've been involved my whole career with Jewish organizations. There are some cases where some really big mistakes have been made by a community, like to end a board of Jewish education and one to end a Hebrew high school and another. And it really impacted a generation of people. And yet it's like it went on like almost unnoticed, and you know, left me very angry sometimes of just really bad decisions by egotistical CEOs, you know. And it's hard because you know that it really impacted a community or impacted a segment. And, it's hard, but I do find in the synagogue, especially, people are very unforgiving if a mistake's made. Even you make a mistake on the Yortzeit list, I don't know what, you know, you've heard it all.
Yeah, no, and actually, it's interesting. You know, what would it look like to name that from a bima, and also to name the hurt of a rabbi, right? Of, you know, like, I think when you think about what the mizbeach is, right? Here's an altar. It's the altar of regret, and everybody is throwing their, you know, their anger on that altar, and how much that altar is holding, right? It's just it's holding a lot. And
go
ahead.
I also think that I think it's better for most of us if we have a two-way relationship with our congregations, and they know that we need them too, that we need them to be there for us as much as we're there for them. And a lot of times, just like you said earlier, that someone quoted that colleague who said nobody was there for me. That happens a lot in a synagogue, where people are not there for you and your happy or sad moments, and don't pay the Shiva call, or don't, you know, and that's hard. I think that's hard when we give our lives, you know.
Well, also, I guess in a covenantal relationship, what's the expectation? Has that expectation ever been explicit, right? Of this is what I need from you. So with some of my Wexner classes, I ask them to write a letter to their rabbi, and like an email to their rabbi to thank their rabbi. And I had a guy do this many years ago in Metro West New Jersey. He came back to the next class and he said, I am so ashamed. I did the homework that you assigned. I wrote my rabbi. I had never really thanked him for, you know, and he was there. He officiated at my kids' weddings, or it was actually, I think it was a long-term relationship. You know, he'd been there for his boys' brisses and bar mitzvahs and weddings, and he's been this spiritual mentor for him for all these years. And he just never wrote, and he never told him that. So he wrote this email, and the rabbi responded instantly. And the rabbi said, you know, that he was teary when he was reading this, and he so rarely gets communications like this from his congregants. And so this gentleman, Bill, came in and he shared both the email that he wrote and the email he received. And he said, how is it that I've been in this congregation for decades, and had you not asked me to do this, it wouldn't have occurred to me. So I think that, you know, I think it's intriguing for a rabbi to stand up and say, you know, I'm hurt, right? Or this is what I need, or what does a covenantal relationship look like? And I want you to know that I need you as much as you need me. And that when you pay me a Shiva visit, and when you compliment me on a sermon, I was astonished recently. I was in services and someone thanked every single person for every job that they did, right? In other words, this one said these blessings, and this one read the Torah, and this one, and the rabbi gave this beautiful sermon, and no one thanked the rabbi. It's like, how is that? And how do you think you're going to keep your rabbi, right? But I think we don't name it. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. Which Michael? I thought I was a Michael.
Okay, I'm sorry. Michael Siegel has S for Siegel goes first, so you'll.
Oh, it's always been the story of my life at the end of the alphabet.
That's why I married a Brown. I moved up in the alphabet.
Michael, I have no regrets about going before you. So I I think one way to frame this as a sermon is to note that we know when God regrets something, but does Abraham have any regrets? Does Sarah have any regrets? Does Jacob have regrets? Does Joseph have? And what would those regrets be? What would you think that they would regret? And it might be a really interesting interchange to have before Rosh Hashanah, to look at, Hagar, look at all of these stories and say, what would you, if they were writing a regret card, what would go on it? I think that might, and that to me opens up the possibility of a lot where makes it safer for people to then look at themselves through that mirror.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Actually, Susie Hanselman, if you look it up, it's Susan Hanselman, wrote a brilliant pedagogic piece on writing letters as a learning tool. So I've used this a lot. Let's say I was teaching the book of Numbers and I said, write a letter from one character to another character. And they were fascinating. They were just fascinating. So that might also help achieve. Now, you can't do that sort of in a sermon, but in a class, in a pre-holiday, writing a letter to your younger self, right? That's always fun too. Michael?
Yeah. First, I'm glad Michael Siegel went first, because that was a very evocative and open door to a lot of wonderful expression. But if I were going to give an ersatz sermon on the first part of this, the self-regret, the first thing that would come up is I might say something like, we was doing an exercise, and a colleague, I'm talking about Ed Friedman's comments, the al-chet that is most is that I've not listened to my own sermon, because I suspect that how many times have we told people the hardest thing is to forgive themselves, and they don't do it, and we don't do it either. But I would then try to offer gamzu latova. How do we make that tova in there? And ki'im beirachtani. I will not. I haven't let it go, but I'm finally gonna let it go when I find the blessing in it.
Beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank
Or
you.
even, I'm thinking about in the Talmud Brachot about blessing on the bad and the good, right? That was another side of that coin. Gorgeous. Other thoughts about constructing? Yeah, Margaret?
We always pick a study topic for the year, and we have an incoming new president who loves the Kohelet part about a time for everything. So there may in fact be a time for regret, although I don't think that's explicit in that text. So I'm playing with the idea of using this in terms of, okay, we've named the regret, and then how do we rebuild? I'm not sure. There's a nugget there.
Right.
But like it's June. I just need a nugget right this second.
Right. Well, so it's interesting. I was thinking about 8 laharos ve'et, right? There's a time to destroy and a time to build up. Is regret some form of destruction, right? And there's some destructive aspect of regret, or certainly perseverative aspect of regret. I want to share a sermon I recently gave with you, because I'm always trying to, and I'm happy to share a little bit of my process, although I give fewer sermons than any of you do, and always open to all your suggestions and thoughts on this. So I always look for a text that I think people are not familiar with, and a text that people aren't familiar with, and a way in that is a little bit original when I can do it, because I think people hear so many sermons that when you get to the big sermons, they're sort of not prepared to be dazzled by something. They're expecting a certain kinds of language. I don't think, did I talk about the March of the Jewish Cliches last week? So I have an expression, the March of the Jewish Cliches, and I just take this out when I speak at federations, and I say, I want you to play this game with me, the March of the Jewish Cliche. I'm going to say something, and then you finish the sentence. I just did this last week. I said, midor lador, from generation to generation, from strength to strength, right? Everyone gets it, right? And then I'm like, tikkun olam. And then, whoever saves one life, it's as if he saves the world, right? So we go through these cliches. And I said, this is every speech, Jewish speech that I've ever heard, right? So I was like, and when you hear something so many times, it's not like taking a warm bath and it feels nostalgic. You just glaze over and you stop. And one of the things I'm struggling with is now we have access to the richness of Jewish text on the computer, one click away. And we keep taking out the same old texts again and again. So what does it look like to teach a different text and teach it a different way? So I'm going to share a sermon that I recently wrote. It's, and you can hate it and that's fine. It's, no, stop share. There we go. I'm sorry. I have so many things open right now. It is not going to this. Okay. So this was for Shavuot, and I would open with the idea in Job that Satan is roaming the earth. Okay. So I'm just going to play this out for you. And I basically stood up and I went into this. I asked people's indulgence to do a little piece of spiritual theater with them. So it was me. Listen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked the, would it be okay for me to spend a few minutes talking to the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death? Can you set something up? Well, he works on union time, but I'll give you 5 minutes. Make it quick. He's not very talkative. You wanted to speak to me. So I was sort of playing both parts. I want to thank you. Thank me? That's a first. For what? You took one of my closest friend's fathers in his sleep. That was kind of you. My pleasure. Is that all? Well, not exactly. I have 5 minutes. And as long as you're here, I need to ask you something. Don't take it personally. Aren't you tired? Of course, I'm exhausted. Did you ever think maybe of an encore career as an OBGYN so you could bring some life into this world? Oh, I hate night shifts and there's too much paperwork in medicine these days. Well, how about early retirement? I hate this job. It's so depressing. I've asked God 1,000 times if I can stop. And you know what God says? I can't find a replacement. Why do you ask? Well, I'm just thinking about this past week alone in your workload in my neighborhood, even just on my street. 2 people lost fathers. A friend's brother-in-law died at 48, leaving a wife and 4 kids. He went in for a simple operation. Only days later, his kids are saying Kaddish. And that woman the road over, she lost her mom during COVID. And then last night you took her dad and made her into an orphan. You speak Yiddish? For vus, for what? I speak every language. And as long as I have a few minutes, can you please explain why so many people in Israel are dying right now? Why he swept through the world with the plague and it wasn't enough? There had to be COVID and Meron, that sweet young tzaddik, Donnie Morris. What did he ever do to you? And now rockets and lynchings. Donnie Morris was one of the people who died in Meron. He was an 18-year-old boy, and he happened I gave this in a congregation that was a neighboring congregation to his. You humans are always the same. You blame it all on me. You make wars and it's my fault. You make bad decisions and I should feel guilty. Well, let me tell you a little secret. God and I once tried an experiment when I was looking for a new job. God said, I'll make the job a little easier. People won't die. They'll just come close to death, close enough for a good scare so that they learn to appreciate life. I naively thought that a little jolt would make all of you kinder and wiser, but I got to tell you, you're a stupid bunch. You never learn. What do you mean we never learn? We're always learning. Nope. You make the same mistakes again and again. Here's something you didn't know about me. I don't only knock on your door when the time comes. I provide a full concierge service. I'm standing at the podium when you're giving your hespedim. Those eulogies are filled with regrets and apologies and if onlys. If only we had another day. Well, God and I tried that. We gave you another day, another week, another year. And you know what? It didn't matter. You thought if you had another day, you'd love better. You'd say sorry. You wouldn't complain or criticize. You do all the small things to make people feel valued and important and secure and loved, but you didn't. Death is the only real fright you know. And even then you don't learn from it. But why can't you tell us when we're going to die? And then we'll fix everything before that day. Oh, don't make me laugh. You think that works? You remember what it says in Ethics of the Fathers? Repent the day before you die. You think Rabbi Eliezer said that? He wrote it when I was in the room. I inspired that. I inspire poetry and love songs and books and half marathons. You're all doing those things because of me. I told you to change before you die up to the very last day. I'm crushed from all your regrets. It's like one long broken record of all the ways you're going to change, but you never do. You ask me if it's enough. You should hear yourselves. But because you asked, I want to show you a little something for Shavuot to make your holiday a little different. Let's learn a bissel together. In the book of Ruth, Boaz invites this poor Moabite to eat a little with his reapers. Vitzbot la kali. He handed her roasted grain. Everyone who talks about Boaz says amazing things about his kindness. But I need to read you something the rabbi said in a midrash about Boaz. They said this was actually an act of stinginess. Let's study the midrash together. So Rav Yitzchak, the son of Marion, said, the scripture came to teach us that if a man is going to do a mitzvah, let it be done with his whole heart. If Reuben had known that the Holy One, blessed be he, would write about him, and Reuben heard and delivered him out of their land, out of their hand, on his shoulders he would have brought Joseph to his father. And if Aaron had known that the Holy One, blessed be he, would write about him, and also behold, he comes forth to meet you, with it as Aaron meeting Moses for the first time, with tambourines and dances he would have met him. And if Boaz had known that the Holy One, blessed be he, would write about him, and they reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and she was satisfied and left, he would have fed her with fattened calves. I don't get it. Then let me explain. Even these great men, who we still read about thousands of years later, had a moment when they could have changed everything. Reuben could have rescued Joseph, but he didn't. When Aaron finally saw Moshe after years of separation, he could have jumped for joy, but he didn't. And had Boaz realized just who Ruth was, he would never have handed her a few grains of parched corn. He would have given her a feast. You see, it's not only you. I was also in the room when Rabbi Yitzchak wrote this. I get around. Rabbi Yitzchak was a great sage. He understood that history records everything for posterity, the good and the moments when you just didn't measure up, when you give too little of yourself. And he told you to do a mitzvah with your whole heart. You only get this one chance. Don't blow it. And again, you didn't listen. Your 5 minutes is up. But wait, before you go, please give me a little hint. Even though I'm not sure I want to know, tell me when we'll see each other again. Well, that would ruin everything. But I will say in the name of the dead, may their memories be for a blessing. Do yourself a favor. Live a little. So what I was trying to do in this sermon was to sort of think about the year of loss and to teach this midrash and to talk about regret, but in a different way. And as I was thinking and thinking and thinking about a different way, I was thinking of Mark Zuzak's book, The Book Thief, which is a fantastic novel, and the narrator is the angel of death. So that was the voice that came to me, and I sort of put those things together. Now, I don't know if it worked. If it didn't work, I'm not the, I'm not the end receiver, but it was to me a way of saying, how could I teach this differently? And I'm wondering what a sermon this Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah on that said in the name of the angel of death, how the angel of death is speaking to us about the regrets that we have. I'm wondering what that would look like for you, or is there a different voice? And some of your thoughts on this. I know we only have 2 minutes, but I just want to make them 2 good minutes. Yeah, Michael?
I'll just throw in one quick little item for unusual text. Driving from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin back to Chicago and looking for an NPR station, I mistakenly hit on a country western and heard the song by Tim McGraw. I don't know the title, but I wrote 8 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And it's essentially about when you know when you're dying, and not unlike what your beautiful piece did. You throw in a contemporary.
Song's called Live Like You Were Dying.
Oh, Live Like You Were Dying. Yeah. Thank you. And I think actually one of the observations I've made recently is that I think COVID has opened people up to talk about their own vulnerabilities in ways that I have not experienced in the adult classroom. I think the mountain of losses that people have had and disappointments, and I think we somehow have to address it. There's all that fervor to leave this behind, but it's taught us something, and it's opened something up that maybe we don't really want to close, which is sort of wrestling with regrets in a different way. I want to give you my email address. If any of you want to share your sermons, I would love to read them. Erica Brown with a C at gwu.edu. I'll drop it in the chat. Hold on. I'm not a great typer. At gwu.edu. I think this is the year, where it's and that idea of asking a question in Elul and asking people to reflect on it so that people can be prepared as why do we expect them to come, come to the door of Rosh Hashanah with, let's say, new clothes and and the brisket in the oven, but really haven't done the reflection of the period. Alan Liu's wonderful book, This Is Real and You're Totally Unprepared. I think that he describes this as a sort of season of repentance rather than a day or two of really thinking about the creation of the world. And if we think about Rosh Hashanah as the creation of a new world this year, and what will that world look like informed by the old world, I think it will, it'll catalyze a lot of beautiful sermons. So thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks for organizing this. I look forward to seeing you in Chicago soon. And yeah, and make it real this year.
Thank you so much, Erica. Wish you a healthy, wonderful summer. We're excited that your son is moving here. I hope that means we'll get to see you too. And we can be in touch. I'd love to get his contact information so we can welcome him.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Will do. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rainey. That was terrific.
Sure.
Yeah, this
That
was
was
great.
really great. I just want to say in her final thoughts of and she said we were talking about regret being about destruction, and Alan Liu's book, in talking about the season of repentance, finishes it with Sukkot. So if anyone is going to talk about regret as a sort of destructive thing and the need to rebuild, then you can certainly connect that to your Sukkot sermons. And I mean, don't forget that comes 5 days later.
And it also, the season really begins with Tisha B'Av, with destruction, and then goes to rebuilding.
Rini. Hi, it's Paul Kerbel. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity maybe later in the summer for everyone to share maybe some of their own ideas. It can be a Devar Tefillah, can be something on the Parsha, be just a sermon idea without going through the whole thing that we can all share with each other at some point. That's another great way to learn.
I'm muted. Yes, for sure. Thank you.
We might,
yeah,
to jump on that, I think that utilizing breakout rooms or pairing people who show up to if we are still on Zoom, to use breakout rooms and create like charutas or something for that, because I think as a large group that may be challenging.
Yes, and I hope we can get together in person too. Be great. Thanks. Okay. Well, it's wonderful to see so many of you. We have some CVR business to take care of. So Sid is not on my screen. Where's Sid?
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Sid.
Hi, Rainey.
Okay. I don't see you, but I hear you. So we're in a transition point for CVR, and I want to take a moment to thank Sid, especially, who has been our president for the past 2 years through 2 very strange years, welcoming me in my new role, and also through everything that the world has gone through in the past 2 years. So as you know, it says in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Shimon Omer Shlosha Ktarim Hein, Keter Torah, V'Keter Kehuna, V'Keter Malchut, V'Keter Shem Tov, Ole al Gabehen. And I want to take a few moments to talk about Sid and what comes to mind when we hear his name, his Shem Tov, which he certainly has. And this is what comes to mind for me. So, number 1, Sid has given a lot of time to the Board of Rabbis, not only in the past 2 years, but the past, is it 6 years, Sid? Something like that?
No, a few more. I couldn't tell you, but it's been
okay, a lot.
Yeah,
a lot of years to the CBR, and we all know how busy all of us are. And just the fact that you've made time for the CBR and you were willing to be president and you really cared about everything that you did and made the time for it has been a blessing to all of us. So thank you for being willing to be so generous with your time. For leading our meetings with such seichel, I will say, listening to everyone, hearing everyone's ideas, helping us move forward, and really validating everybody at the meeting and seeing the good in everybody's ideas. I think you are a masterful meeting facilitator, and I learned a lot just experiencing that with you for the past couple of years. Sid's knowledge of our Jewish community, all of the different players, all of the different rabbis, federation, different organizations. Sid has really immersed himself in the larger Jewish community. And if you want to know how something works in Chicago or how to get something done or who is the right person to talk to, Sid knows that. And that's something you can only learn after years and years of really investing yourself. And finally, I want to say that Sid personally was really helpful to me in figuring out what this job is all about, what this job can be, and being particularly supportive to me and making time for my questions and phone calls, and always with kindness and patience and a warmth and friendliness that has helped us develop not only a professional relationship, but a really lovely friendship. So Sid, you definitely have a shem tov. We all really appreciate you. And I think tomorrow, which I apologize for, you will be receiving a couple of books from your teachers at Hartman that we hope you will enjoy. One is the New Jewish Canon, and one is The Wandering Jew. So I hope you enjoy those books and know how much all of us appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rini. Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you. I'm going to be really brief because I appreciate everyone's time, but I just wanted to say a quick thank you to three people. First, I just wanted to start by thanking Michael Belinsky for building the culture of our CBR. He really transitioned us and created this warmth and supportive, learning, sharing community, and grateful for what he's taught and continues to share, the knowledge he continues to share with us. I, of course, want to thank Rini Dickman for being a partner and friend who had to start this job shortly after with COVID. And I would say that just like a congregation, where the professional staff does the heavy lifting and the president of the congregation gets like all of the credit for all of the great things that happen, I want to say that the same thing is true of the CBR, that Rini does the heavy lifting. And so the praise that thank you for the kind words, but it goes back to the speaker, to you for doing the heavy lifting over the year and growing into a new role and a different role than the executive vice president has had before, both giving time to Federation as well as to us. So you've been juggling in the hardest of circumstances and taken what Michael created and really broadened our community. As I looked around the room today at our Zoom room, there are people here who have always been present, and there are people who are new to being present. And what a great way to end this year with Erica's two programs these last 2 weeks. So just fantastic. The third person I just want to mention has no role at the CBR, but Rabbi Pupko. I just want to mention him because to me his role here in Chicago, he's created a climate in Chicago where he's made it a special place to be rabbi. And brought rabbis together from all the streams of Judaism, and just makes sure that there's a strong bond between our lay leaders and our clergy here. I think he would never want to have the credit be shared to him, given to him. He doesn't crave. He runs away from that kind of thing. But I just want to mention how privileged I think we are as a broader community, and CBR is, even though this isn't his thing, from who he is and what he provides us. And finally, I just want to say Mazel Tov to Mark Rudolph, who's going to be our next president. And however I can be helpful, Mark, please let me know, and I'll look forward to being present with you and continuing to see the CBR play a positive role for all of us. So thank you for giving me this honor and allowing me to be president for a couple of years. Thanks. I'll turn it back to Rini.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen for a minute to see the slate that we're going to hopefully vote on and approve. So let me do that. Share the screen. Here we go. Can you see that? Do you see my, did it share? Yes, okay. Okay, so we're voting to approve this slate. The president is Mark Rudolph, vice president Michael Schwab, Andrea London, Jeffrey Weil, our treasurer David Russo, our secretary Suzanne Griffel, our committee members David Wolkenfeld, Margaret Frischklein is going to continue, and then we're very excited. These were the phone calls I procrastinated, but I did them and people agreed. Lisa Green, Alan Kensky, Taryn Tackman, and Michelle Stern have graciously agreed to serve as committee members. So we're excited to hear your ideas. Of course, we're open to everyone's ideas. And I believe the way this works is that someone makes a motion to accept this, someone seconds it, and then we all okay it, except for me. I think I don't vote.
I move we accept the slate.
Second.
Okay, maybe a thumbs up from everyone. Okay. Terrific.
Mazel Tov.
Wonderful. Thank you to everyone for coming today. And I want to say a special thank you to Michael Zedek. Are you still with us? For serving on the executive committee last year, and Daniel Kurzane and Yitzhak Falk and Craig Morantz also served. So thank you to everybody. And Mark, we're super excited that you're going to be our president, and wish everyone a healthy summer. And you will be hearing from us about getting together to share our own ideas as High Holy Days come upon us. Anybody else have a comment, something you want to say? Oh, and welcome to Arthur Stern. Arthur Stern is in Springfield, and we welcome you as an official member of the CBR, and we look forward to getting to know you. We're so glad that you're here. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Be well.
Thanks, Rini.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mazel Tov,
Thanks.
Mark, and thank you, Sydney. You guys are great.
Thanks
Thanks
so
so much, Rini.